way home. The coffee there was watery, the chairs squeaked if you shifted too much, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like a wasp that wouldn't leave. But the place had one thing I didn't have anywhere else: silence. And her. She sat behind the reference desk most afternoons. Dark hair pulled back, glasses sliding down her nose, the kind of expression that looked like she was halfway between patience and exhaustion. She didn't smile much, at least, not in the obvious way. But if you caught her right when someone returned a book she loved, the corner of her mouth tilted just enough to make you wonder what else she kept hidden. The first time she spoke to me, it wasn't anything special. I couldn't find an old collection of essays for a class I wasn't even sure I'd finish. She glanced up, asked what edition, and then disappeared into the stacks. When she came back, she set the book down in front of me and said, "This one's better. Less self-important." And then, before I could answer, she was already turning back to her computer. That should have been it. But I came back the next day. And the next. I told myself I was there for the quiet. That I liked how time slowed down between the shelves. But really, it was the way she remembered things she had no reason to. My name. The fact I always asked for books on philosophy but never checked them out. That I drank tea, not coffee. She'd slide the mug across the counter before I even asked. "You're predictable," she said once. Her tone was dry, but her eyes flicked up long enough to catch mine before dropping again. Maybe predictable wasn't such a bad thing. The truth is, I didn't have anyone waiting for me at home. My phone was full of half-written texts I never sent. Friends I kept meaning to call back. A family group chat I muted. Most nights I'd heat something frozen, put on music too quietly to bother the neighbors, and stare at the screen without watching. At the library, though, even silence felt different. Even the pauses seemed to belong to something. One rainy afternoon, she noticed me folding the edge of my napkin into smaller and smaller squares. She leaned across the counter, chin propped in her hand. Nervous habit? I shook my head. Just, keeps me busy. Her gaze lingered a second longer than it should have. She didn't call me out on it. Just nodded, like she understood more than I said. Sometimes I'd catch myself watching the way she moved, how carefully she handled worn paperbacks, how her fingers brushed the spines like she knew each one personally. She never noticed me staring. Or maybe she did, and just didn't let on. The thing about her was that she carried herself like she belonged to a different pace of time. Everyone else hurried in and out, earbuds in, phones out. She stayed steady. Intentional. Like nothing could pull her faster than she allowed. And then one evening, just before closing, as I was packing up my laptop, she came over. No desk between us this time. "You're here a lot," she said. Not accusing. Just observing. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. She didn't fill the silence for me. Instead, she slipped a scrap of paper across the table. A number. Not the library's. Hers. "I don't do this," she said, almost under her breath. "But maybe you'll understand." By the time I looked up, she was already walking back to the counter, her hand brushing against the edge of the desk like she needed to steady herself. The library lights buzzed, the clock ticked too loudly, and the paper felt heavier than it should in my hand. I sat there a long while, just staring at it, wondering what kind of secret a librarian would trust me with, and what it would cost me to find out. I didn't call her right away. The number stayed folded in my wallet for days, like a ticket I wasn't sure I'd earned. Each night I'd take it out, trace the ink with my thumb, and then put it back. I told myself it was enough just knowing it was there, that someone like her even thought to give it to me. But the next time I saw her, she acted like nothing had happened. She stamped returns, slid books across the counter, asked if I wanted tea. Not a flicker of hesitation. It was me who fumbled, knocking over my pen, answering too quickly, trying not to look obvious. It wasn't until the library was nearly empty that she broke the rhythm. "You're quieter today," she said, shelving a stack of biographies. "I'm always quiet. Not like this." Her back was turned, but her voice carried enough to make my chest tighten. I wanted to ask what she meant, but instead I followed her down the aisle and grabbed half the stack before she could protest. "You don't have to, I know." I balanced the books against my chest. "But I want to." She gave me a look, half skeptical, half something softer. Then she nodded, and we worked in silence. That's when she told me, almost casually, that she used to be married. Her words were clipped, like she was testing how they sounded in the air. "Divorced for 6 years now," she added, sliding a volume back into place. "It's easier to say it fast." I didn't know what to do with the information, so I just nodded. My mind filled in blanks she didn't give me: arguments, a quiet house, maybe a ring tucked away in a drawer. "And you?" she asked. I shook my head. "No one waiting on me." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "That makes 2 of us." For a second, I pictured what it would look like if someone walked by and saw us there, me, 20-something, trying not to stare too long at a woman who carried twice my steadiness, twice my history. It would look wrong. It would be questioned. Maybe even mocked. But in that quiet aisle, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like standing too close to a fireplace. You know you should step back, but you don't. We finished shelving and returned to the desk. The last patron had gone. The rain tapped against the windows, steady and patient. She poured us both tea from her thermos, handing me the cup with fingers that brushed mine for only a second. It wasn't deliberate. At least, I told myself it wasn't. Still, I carried that touch longer than the heat of the tea. We sat, not speaking, just letting the silence stretch. I caught her looking at me once, quickly, then away again. I don't know why that moment stayed with me, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. When I left, she didn't say goodbye in words. She just pressed a bookmark into my hand. A small gesture, ordinary on the surface. But the way her fingers lingered, it said everything neither of us dared to. The bookmark stayed in my pocket all week. I told myself it was just paper, but whenever my hand brushed against it, I'd feel the ghost of her fingers again. When I finally walked back into the library, something was different. She didn't look up right away. Usually, she noticed me within seconds, eyes flicking up over the rim of her glasses, just a quick acknowledgement. This time, she kept typing, as if I wasn't there. I hovered near the desk longer than I should have. "Tea?" I asked. She paused, hands resting on the keyboard. Then, "Not today." Her tone was flat, careful. The kind of careful that meant something else was on her mind. I sat anyway, unfolding my laptop just to give my hands something to do. The silence between us was heavier than usual, pressing at the edges. I caught her watching me once, but she looked away so fast it almost felt like I imagined it. It wasn't until an hour later, when most people had left, that she finally came over. She carried a stack of books and dropped them on the table harder than necessary. "You shouldn't be here so much." I blinked. "Why not?" "Because people notice." Her voice was low, but sharp enough to cut through me. I wanted to ask who noticed, but before I could, someone did, an older man, probably mid-50s, stepping up to the desk. He greeted her with a familiarity that made me pause, like he'd known her longer than I had. She straightened immediately, posture shifting, voice warmer. I watched the exchange from a distance, my chest tightening at how easily she smiled for him. Not the half-smile she gave me, but something lighter. Natural. And then he left. Just like that. She returned to the table, a faint edge of irritation on her face, though I couldn't tell if it was directed at him, or me, or herself. "Friend?" I asked carefully. "Something like that." She didn't elaborate. We fell into silence again, but not the usual kind. This one carried too many questions. I found myself staring at her hands as she smoothed the edge of a book cover. Her fingers lingered there, tracing lines that weren't really there. My throat tightened with words I didn't dare say. "You make it hard to," I stopped. Shook my head. Her eyes met mine. Steady. Searching. "What?" she asked. I opened my mouth, but the words jammed somewhere between my chest and my throat. Instead, I leaned forward, just a fraction, just enough that the air between us shifted. Her breath caught. I swear I heard it. For a second, the world shrank, just her, just me, the faint hum of the fluorescent lights. And then she pulled back. Subtle, but enough. She stood, collecting the books in a quick, almost clumsy movement. "We're closing soon," she said, though the clock said otherwise. I sat there, heart hammering, tasting the edge of something we almost crossed. It was late when I found her outside, standing by the library steps. The air was cool, the kind that made every breath sharp. She wasn't waiting for me, not really, but she didn't seem surprised when I appeared either. "You walk home?" I asked. "Sometimes." She tugged her coat tighter. "I'll walk with you." She hesitated. Just long enough for me to wonder if she'd refuse. Then she nodded, and we fell into step. The streets were quiet, only the sound of our shoes on wet pavement. I wanted to fill the silence, but everything I thought of sounded either too small or too dangerous. She saved me from it by speaking first. "That man you saw the other day," she said suddenly. "He's not, well, he was, once. Years ago." I glanced at her, but she kept her eyes forward. "I shouldn't care what you think," she added. "But I do." Something inside me loosened at that. "You don't have to explain." "I know." Her voice dropped, almost to a whisper. "But I wanted to." We reached a park bench under a dim streetlight. She sat, brushing away a few stray leaves. I joined her, leaving just enough space between us to keep from trembling. "I feel ridiculous," she said after a long pause. "You're, what, 23? 24. Still." She laughed softly, but it wasn't humor. "You have a whole life ahead." "And me," her voice caught. "I should know better." I swallowed hard. "Do you think I don't know that? That I haven't thought about what people would say? About what it would look like?" Her hands were clasped in her lap, knuckles pale. "Then why?" She stopped herself, pressing her lips together. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "Because this, whatever it is, it doesn't feel wrong. Except when I start thinking about it too much." That made her look at me. Really look. The kind of gaze that stripped everything down until I couldn't pretend. "You'll regret me," she said quietly. I shook my head, but the truth was, I didn't know. Maybe I would. Maybe she would regret me first. But right then, under the streetlight, none of that mattered. I wanted to reach for her hand, but my fingers only twitched against my knee. She noticed. Her eyes flicked to the movement, then back to my face. The silence stretched so long it felt like a thread pulled tight, ready to snap. "I shouldn't be here with you," she whispered. "Then why are you?" My voice came out rougher than I meant. Her lips parted, like she was about to answer. Or maybe confess something else entirely. The moment hovered, fragile, on the edge of breaking. And then she looked away. The question hung there, unfinished, heavier than anything either of us had said. For a week, she wasn't there. The first day, I thought maybe she was sick. By the third, I started making excuses for her, meetings, errands, something I wasn't supposed to know about. But by the seventh day, it felt deliberate. The substitute at the desk, a younger librarian with clipped answers and no patience, said she'd taken some personal leave. That was all. No details. No return date. I told myself I didn't care. That it was none of my business. But each time I sat up at my usual table, I found myself glancing toward the desk, waiting for the sound of her voice, the faint scrape of her chair. Nothing. Just silence that no amount of typing could fill. By the time she returned, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked the same dark hair, same glasses, but something in her posture had shifted. She avoided my eyes when I walked in. No tea waiting, no half smile, no quiet acknowledgement. It was me who broke first. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "I'm fine." But the way she said it, tight, brittle, told me she wasn't. I waited, thinking she'd explain. She didn't. Instead, she busied herself with a pile of overdue notices. It wasn't until the library was nearly empty that she finally spoke again, without looking up. "I have a daughter," she said flatly. "She's your age. A little older, actually." The words landed like a stone in water, rippling out in every direction. I opened my mouth, closed it. "She doesn't know about you," she added quickly. "About this, whatever it is." I didn't know what to say. My mind spun through images I hadn't considered, her daughter's face, the possibility of recognition, the sheer weight of what it meant. "That's why you disappeared?" I asked finally. She nodded once. "I thought maybe if I pulled back, you'd," she trailed off, letting the sentence dissolve. "Forget you." I finished. Her silence was answer enough. I left earlier than usual that night, unable to stand the way the distance between us had suddenly stretched. On the walk home, I pulled out my phone more than once, typing messages I never sent. "I don't care about the daughter. I don't want to stop seeing you. Please don't disappear again." Each time, I erased the words before hitting send. By the time I got to my apartment, I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. I sat at the edge of my bed, phone still in my hand, the cursor blinking in an empty message box. The room felt too quiet, like even the air was waiting for me to decide. But I didn't. I let the phone slip onto the nightstand, screen still glowing. A message unsent. It was raining the night I saw her again. Not at the library, there, she'd kept her distance. But on the sidewalk outside, under the awning of a closed bakery. She was half hidden, arms crossed, watching the water pool at the curb. I almost walked past. Almost. But she looked up at the exact moment I slowed, like she'd been expecting me. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Neither should you." That made her laugh, soft and humorless. She shifted, giving me space beneath the awning. I stepped closer, close enough to smell rain on her coat, the faint trace of old books that never seemed to leave her. For a while, neither of us spoke. Just the steady patter of rain, the hum of a streetlight. Finally, I said, "Why did you tell me about your daughter?" Her jaw tightened. "Because it's the truth. And because I thought it might stop you from looking at me the way you do." I swallowed hard. "Did it?" She shook her head slowly, eyes fixed on the street. "No," the word hung there, heavier than it should have been. "I don't know what I'm doing," she admitted. "I'm old enough to know better. Old enough to protect myself." And yet, her voice cracked on the last word, so quiet I almost missed it. I let out a shaky breath. "You think I know what I'm doing? I go home every night and type out messages I never send. I sit in silence just to feel close to you. It doesn't make sense. None of it does. But it's the only thing that feels," I broke off, shaking my head. "I don't even have the right word." She finally turned to me. The rainlight caught her face, softening the years she carried. For the first time, she didn't look like the steady one. She looked breakable. "What if this ruins me?" she whispered. I forced myself not to reach for her. "Then let me ruin with you." The silence after that felt like standing at the edge of something irreversible. She closed her eyes, breathed in slow. "I can't promise anything," she said at last. "I'm not asking you to." Her hand twitched at her side, barely noticeable. But then it shifted, fingers brushing mine in a touch so tentative it felt like it might vanish if I breathed too hard. I didn't grab her hand. Didn't push. Just let the contact linger. Her shoulders dropped, some invisible weight loosening. She opened her eyes again and looked at me, not with fear, not with regret, just with the kind of clarity you don't get often in life. And then, so softly I almost doubted I heard it, she said, "Okay." That was all. But it was enough. Time didn't stop after that night. It never does. The library reopened on its usual schedule. I still came in, though not every day, not with the same restless urgency. Sometimes I'd see her behind the desk, steady as ever, glasses sliding down her nose. But something in the way she looked at me had shifted. Not obvious, not for anyone else to notice, but for me, it was everything. She started pouring 2 cups of tea without asking. I stopped pretending I was only there to study. We didn't need to name it. We just, let it be. It wasn't all easy. There were weeks she pulled back, the old fears returning like tides. Days I stayed away, convinced maybe I was asking too much. But the thing was, we always found our way back. Once, months later, I saw her sitting on the same park bench where we'd nearly come undone. I sat beside her, leaving the same careful space between us. Without looking, she reached into her bag and handed me a thermos. "Tea," she said simply. "Not coffee?" I asked. Her lips twitched. "You're predictable." I smiled, holding the cup between my palms, letting the warmth settle into me. The air was cool, the streetlight flickering just as it had before. But this time, there was no edge, no thread pulled tight. Just the quiet kind of presence that felt like home. At 8:47 one morning, I caught myself pausing at the library doors, not because I doubted going in, but because I realized I wasn't going there to escape anymore. I was going there because she was inside. She noticed it too, in her own way. One evening, when we closed down the place together, she set a bookmark on my stack of things. Not pressed into my hand this time, just resting there, casual, like it belonged. On it, written in her careful handwriting, were 3 words, "You stayed anyway." I don't know if love is supposed to feel like that. Not fireworks, not sweeping declarations. Just, earned. Quietly. In the pauses. In the cups of tea, the walks home, the silence that doesn't need filling. She was just a librarian when I met her. But now she's the reason I never feel paused anymore. She's the unfinished sentence life finally decided to complete. And the best part? It's ours. Only ours. Pushpin engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? Share your thoughts below, I'd love to bring more of them to life.